There's a specific kind of silence that settles into a house when trust begins to crack. It's not the peaceful quiet of a Sunday morning, or the comfortable hush of two people who understand each other without words. No, this silence is thick, suffocating, heavy with questions you're too afraid to ask out loud. And in my home, that silence had a location. It lived behind my daughter's bedroom door, a door that, for reasons I couldn't understand, wouldn't open anymore. My name is Claire Thompson, and I never imagined I'd become the kind of mother who doubted her own child. But lately, every single time I walk past Emily's room, whether it was 3 in the afternoon or 9 at night, that door was locked. Not just closed, locked. The kind of lock that sends a clear message: stay out, don't ask, don't come near. And God help me, I was starting to listen to that message in all the wrong ways. Our house isn't large. It's one of those modest suburban builds from the 70s, the kind with narrow hallways and thin walls that carry sound like whispers through water. The floorboards creak in a specific rhythm when you walk from the kitchen to the bedrooms. 3 long groans, then a shorter squeak near the bathroom door. I know every sound this house makes. I've lived here for 23 years, raised my daughter here, buried my husband's memory here. So when something changes, I notice. It started small. Emily began closing her door more often during the day. At first, I told myself it was normal. She was 18 after all, transitioning into adulthood, needing space to breathe and think and become whoever she was meant to be. I respected that. I wanted to respect that. But then the closed door became a locked door, and the locked door became a pattern. I remember the first morning I really paid attention. It was a Tuesday, raining softly against the windows in that persistent Pacific Northwest way that makes everything feel gray and introspective. I just poured myself a second cup of coffee, the strong dark kind that my husband used to say could wake the dead, and I was carrying it down the hallway when I noticed her door was shut. Again, I paused, steam curling up from my mug, and listened. Nothing. Not the sound of music, not the low hum of a video call, not the rustle of pages turning or fingers tapping on a keyboard. Just silence. Emily, I called softly, knocking twice with my knuckle. Honey, you awake? A pause, then her voice muffled and tight. Yeah, Mom. I'm on a call. Can you give me a minute? I frowned at the door. A call? At 9 in the morning? With complete silence on the other end? But I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, and walked away. The floorboards groaned their familiar song beneath my feet, and I told myself I was being paranoid, overthinking, invading her privacy with my worry. Still, something didn't sit right. Over the next few days, I started noticing the excuses piling up like dirty laundry. When I asked why her door was locked at 2 in the afternoon, she said she was napping. When I wondered aloud why I heard her moving around at midnight, she claimed she couldn't sleep and was reading. When I gently suggested we have lunch together, she said she had too much work, though I'd never seen her laptop open, never heard the printer hum, never smelled the burnt coffee that used to accompany her late-night study sessions. Every explanation was thin, fragile, like tissue paper held up to the light, and I was starting to see through them. One evening, I stood in the hallway outside her room and pressed my ear to the door. I'm not proud of it. I felt like a spy in my own home, a stranger eavesdropping on a life that used to be an open book. But desperation does strange things to a mother's instincts. I heard her voice, low, strained, urgent. I told you I'm working on it, she hissed. I just need more time. Please. A pause, and then, faint but unmistakable, another voice, deeper, male. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was sharp, commanding, cold. My hand flew to my mouth, and I stepped back so quickly I nearly tripped over the edge of the hallway rug. My heart hammered in my chest, each beat a drum of panic and confusion. Who was in there? Why hadn't she told me? Why was her voice shaking like that, like she was afraid? I stood frozen, gripping my coffee mug so tightly I thought it might shatter, and for the first time in 18 years of motherhood, I realized I had no idea who my daughter was anymore. The breaking point came at 2 in the morning. I'd been lying awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain drum against the tin roof. Sleep had become a stranger to me. Every creak of the house, every shift of the wind, sent my mind spiraling into worst-case scenarios. Was she in trouble? Was she hiding something dangerous? Was I losing her? And then I heard it. A voice, not Emily's. It came from her room, low and deliberate, cutting through the quiet like a blade. Is she still out there? I sat up so fast my head spun. My bare feet hit the cold floor, and I was moving before I could think, creeping down the hallway with my breath caught somewhere between my lungs and my throat. The door to her room was closed, locked, but I could see the thin line of light beneath it, golden and flickering like a candle or a phone screen. I reached for the doorknob. My hand was trembling. I turned it, locked, and then from the other side, I heard the sound that would haunt me for weeks, the soft metallic rattle of the lock being tested from the inside, like someone was making sure I couldn't get in. I stood there, frozen, my hand still on the knob, my pulse roaring in my ears, and somewhere behind that door, a man whispered again. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen with the lights lights off, staring at the shadows stretching across the walls, trying to understand how we'd arrived here. How the little girl who used to crawl into my lap and ask me to read her the same bedtime story 3 times in a row had become a stranger behind a locked door. So I did what any mother would do when the present becomes unbearable. I went back to the past. Emily was born on a Sunday morning in late May, when the world smelled like fresh-cut grass and lilacs bloomed in wild purple clusters along the fence line. She came into this world screaming loud, furious, alive, and I remember thinking, this one's going to be a fighter. And she was. She fought to walk at 10 months, tumbling over her own feet but refusing to give up. She fought to read before kindergarten, sounding out words with a stubborn determination that made me laugh and cry at the same time. She fought to make the soccer team, to paint her bedroom walls pastel yellow, to stay up late on school nights debating philosophy and dreams and the meaning of constellations. We were close, not just mother and daughter, friends. I remember Sunday mornings when I'd make cinnamon pancakes, and she'd sit at the counter with syrup dripping down her chin, telling me about the boys she liked or the test she aced or the argument she'd won in history class. I remember the smell of her lavender shampoo when she hugged me goodnight. I remember the sound of her laughter, bright and unrestrained, like bells ringing in an empty chapel. I remember when she trusted me. The shift didn't happen overnight. It was gradual, like the way summer fades into autumn, so subtle you don't notice until the leaves are already falling. It started after her 18th birthday. She'd been so excited to turn 18. Freedom, she called it. The beginning of adulthood. The chance to make her own choices. And I supported that. I wanted her to grow, to become independent, to find her own voice in the world. But independence became withdrawal. She stopped joining us for family dinners, claiming she'd already eaten or wasn't hungry. She stopped talking about her day. Her phone became an extension of her hand, glued to her palm, screen always angled away from me. She started flinching when I walked into a room, like I was an intruder instead of her mother. And her eyes, God, her eyes changed. They used to be bright, full of light and mischief and hope. But now, when she looked at me, there was something else. Something dark and anxious and desperately guarded. I tried to reach her. I really did. One evening, I knocked on her door. It wasn't locked yet back then, and asked if we could talk. She was sitting on her bed, knees pulled to her chest, staring at her phone with a look I can only describe as haunted. Talk about what? She asked without looking up. About you, I said gently, sitting on the edge of her bed. About how you're doing. You seem distant lately. Is everything okay? She didn't answer right away. For a moment, I thought she might open up. I could see the words forming behind her eyes, the truth hovering on her lips. But then she blinked and the walls went up. I'm fine, Mom, she said flatly. Just tired. School's been stressful. Are you sure? Because if something's wrong, you can tell me. You know that, right? I know. Her voice was hollow. But there's nothing wrong. I'm fine. She wasn't fine. I knew it the way mothers know things, deep in the marrow, in the place where instinct lives. But I didn't push. I let her keep her walls. I let her lock me out. And I've regretted it every day since. The real alarm bells started ringing a few weeks later. I was folding laundry in the living room when Emily came home from wherever she'd been. She didn't tell me anymore, and I'd stopped asking. She dropped her bag by the door, mumbled something about needing to rest, and disappeared into her room. But she'd left her jacket on the couch, and when I picked it up to hang it in the closet, something fell out of the pocket. An envelope. It was small, white, unsealed, and inside I could see the corner of cash, 20s, 50s, maybe more, folded neatly and tucked inside. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. Privacy, boundaries, trust, all the things good mothers are supposed to respect. But my hands were already unfolding the envelope, and my eyes were already reading the name written on the outside in Emily's handwriting. Tyler Cross. I didn't know that name. I'd never heard her mention a Tyler. And as I stood there in the dim light of the living room, holding an envelope full of cash meant for a man I'd never met, I felt the first cold fingers of real fear wrap around my heart. That night I watched her door. I didn't mean to. I told myself I was just cleaning the kitchen, just organizing the pantry, just tidying the hallway closet. But every task I invented brought me closer to her room, listening for sounds, searching for clues, desperate to understand what was happening to my daughter. And then I saw it. Through the narrow gap between her door and the frame, the lock wasn't engaged yet. I caught a glimpse of her sitting on the floor, phone pressed to her ear, face streaked with tears. I'm trying, she sobbed quietly. I swear I'm trying. Just please give me more time. She paused, listening, and then her face crumpled, and she whispered something I'll never forget. I'm scared. I wanted to burst through that door. I wanted to grab her and hold her and demand to know who was making my daughter cry in the dark. But before I could move, she hung up the phone, wiped her face, and stood. And then she walked to the door and locked it. The sound of that lock clicking into place felt like a door closing between us forever. The envelope haunted me. I put it back exactly where I found it, but the name Tyler Cross stayed lodged in my mind like a splinter I couldn't pull free. free. I tried searching for him online, scrolling through social media profiles and public records, but there were too many Tyler Crosses in the world, and none of them seemed connected to my daughter's life. At least none that I could see. So I did what I had been doing for weeks. I watched. I listened. I waited for the truth to reveal itself. Mornings became a battleground of small, strange details. The smell of burnt toast lingered in the kitchen even though Emily claimed she hadn't eaten. Her phone buzzed constantly. Notifications she silenced with lightning speed, her hand always covering the screen. She started wearing long sleeves even though it was June, and when I asked her why, she laughed it off, saying she was cold. But I saw the bruises, dark mottled purple marks peeking out from beneath her cuffs when she reached for the orange juice, finger-shaped shadows on her forearm when she pushed her hair behind her ear. "Emily," I said one morning, my voice tight with concern, "what happened to your arm?" She glanced down, then quickly pulled her sleeve lower. "Oh, that? I just bumped into a door at work. I'm clumsy." "A door?" "Yeah, Mom, a door. It's not a big deal." But her voice trembled when she said it, and she wouldn't meet my eyes. The phone call I overheard a few days later shattered whatever fragile hope I'd been clinging to. I was in the laundry room folding towels when I heard her voice drifting through the wall. Her room shared a thin partition with a utility space, and if I stayed very still, I could hear almost everything. She was arguing with someone. "I told you I'm trying," she hissed, her voice sharp with frustration and fear. "Stop pressuring me. I can't do this any faster." A pause. "No, I haven't told her, and I'm not going to. She doesn't need to know." Another pause, longer this time, and then in a voice so small it broke my heart, "Please don't do that. Please. I'll get it. I promise." I pressed my hand against the wall, as if I could reach through it and pull her to safety. But all I could do was listen as she ended the call and dissolved into quiet gasping sobs. I started keeping a mental log. Every strange behavior, every inconsistency, every moment that didn't add up. She'd leave the house at odd hours, 10 at night, 6 in the morning, claiming she had errands or shifts at work, but her paychecks didn't match the hours she said she was working. She'd come home with expensive things, new headphones, a designer bag, electronics I knew she couldn't afford, and when I asked where they came from, she'd say a friend gave them to her. But she didn't have friends anymore. Not that I'd seen. She deleted all her social media, stopped going out, stopped talking to the girls she used to laugh with on the porch swing during summer nights. She'd become a ghost in her own life. And then I found the business card. It was tucked into the pocket of her jeans, the ones I was washing because she'd left them in a heap on the bathroom floor. I almost missed it, almost tossed it into the trash with a lint and crumpled receipts. But something made me pause. The card was plain, white, professional, and printed across the front in sharp black letters. Tyler Cross, private consultant. No phone number, no email, just a name and a title that meant absolutely nothing. I stared at it for a long time, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. Who was this man? Why did my daughter have his card? And why did the sight of his name make my skin crawl? That night, I tried to confront her. I waited until she came out of her room, rare these days, and stopped her in the hallway. "Emily," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "We need to talk." She froze, her back to me, her hand on the doorknob. "About what?" "About what's going on with you. About why you're so distant. About why you're hiding things from me." She turned slowly, and for a moment I saw the daughter I used to know, the one who needed me, who trusted me, who let me in. But then her face hardened. "I'm not hiding anything, Mom," she said coldly. "I'm just trying to live my life. Can you let me do that? Not if it's hurting you." "Nothing's hurting me." "Then explain the bruises. Explain the money. Explain why you're crying in your room at night." Her jaw tightened, and her eyes, those beautiful eyes that used to hold so much light, filled with something dark and desperate. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Then help me understand." But she just shook her head, turned away, and disappeared back into her room. And this time, when the lock clicked into place, it sounded like a prison door closing. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the hallway outside her room, my back against the wall, staring at that locked door and wondering how much longer I could let this go on. And then just after midnight, I heard it. A voice, male, low, threatening. "You know what happens if you don't finish this, right?" A pause. Emily's voice, small and broken. "I know. Good, because I'm not patient. And neither are they." The sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate. And then through the narrow gap beneath her door, I saw a shadow pass. A man's shadow, tall, broad-shouldered, moving like a predator in the dark. I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from gasping, my whole body shaking with a terror I'd never known. Someone was in my daughter's room, someone she was afraid of, and I had no idea how to save her. The nights became unbearable. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain tap its endless rhythm against the tin roof, and wonder what was happening on the other side of that locked door. Was she safe? Was she scared? Was she planning something terrible? Or was something terrible being done to her? The questions gnawed at me like a slow poison. I tried everything I could think of. I asked her directly, she deflected. I left notes on her door. She ignored them. I suggested therapy, family counseling, even just a walk around the block to talk. She said no to all of it. "Mom, please," she said one afternoon, her voice edged with exhaustion. "Just leave me alone. I'm fine. I need you to trust me." But trust is a two-way street, and she'd locked every door between us. The breaking point came on a Thursday. I'd spent the morning pacing the house, my nerves stretched so thin I thought they might snap. Emily had locked herself in her room again, this time for nearly 4 hours, and she wasn't answering my calls or texts. I knocked on the door, gently at first, then harder. "Emily? Honey, please. Just let me know you're okay." Nothing. I knocked again, panic rising in my chest like floodwater. "Emily, answer me." Still nothing. And that's when I broke. I grabbed a screwdriver from the kitchen drawer and tried to force the lock. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the tool, and the lock wouldn't budge. I was crying now, openly, desperately, banging on the door with my fist and screaming her name. And then finally the lock clicked. The door opened a crack. Emily stood there, her face pale, her eyes red and swollen. She looked at me like I was a stranger. "What is wrong with you?" she hissed. "What's wrong with me?" I choked out. "Emily, I don't know what's happening to you, but I can't stand by and watch you destroy yourself. Please, just talk to me." She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker in her eyes, something like regret, or maybe just exhaustion. But then she shook her head. "You wouldn't understand," she whispered, and she closed the door. That night, while she was in the shower, I did the unthinkable. I searched her room. I know how that sounds. I know what kind of mother it makes me, but I was out of options, out of time, out of hope. I moved quickly, quietly, my heart hammering in my chest as I rifled through drawers and checked beneath a mattress. I found things that made my stomach turn. Strange receipts from stores I didn't recognize, electronics she shouldn't have been able to afford, a stack of unopened mail addressed to Tyler Cross. And then I found the business card again. This time it wasn't alone. There was a phone number scrawled on the back in Emily's handwriting, and beneath it a single word: help. I sat on the edge of her bed, staring at that card, and something inside me shifted. Fear became resolve. Confusion became clarity. I didn't know what Tyler Cross had done to my daughter, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was going to find out, and I was going to stop him. That night, I sat at my laptop for hours, searching for answers. I looked at private investigators. I read articles about coercion, manipulation, abusive relationships. I even considered calling the police, but what would I tell them? That my daughter was hiding something? That a man I'd never met had a business card in her room? They tell me to wait, to let it play out, to respect her privacy, but I couldn't wait anymore. And that's when I saw the ad. A small, discreet website selling surveillance equipment, tiny cameras, pinhole lenses, devices so small they could be hidden anywhere. I stared at the screen for a long time, my finger hovering over the add to cart button. This was a line I'd never imagined crossing, but as I sat there in the dark, listening to the rain and the creak of the house and the muffled sound of Emily crying in her room, I realized I didn't have a choice. If she wouldn't let me in, I'd find another way to see the truth. The camera arrived 2 days later in a plain brown box. I opened it in the garage, my hands trembling, my stomach churning with guilt and fear. The device was smaller than I'd imagined, no bigger than a button, with a lens so discreet you'd never notice it unless you were looking. I turned it over in my palm, staring at it like it was a loaded gun. What kind of mother was I? What kind of person did this to their own child? But then I thought of the bruises, the fear in her voice, the shadow of a man in her room, and I knew I was the kind of mother who would do anything to save her daughter. I waited until she was in the shower. The water was running, steam seeping out from beneath the bathroom door, and I knew I had maybe 10 minutes before she came out. I slipped into her room, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure she'd hear it over the water. I looked around, searching for the perfect spot, somewhere she'd never noticed, somewhere with a clear view of the room. And then I saw it, a bookshelf in the corner, cluttered with old textbooks and forgotten knickknacks. I placed the camera behind a small ceramic owl, angling it just right so the lens faced the center of the room. It was perfect. It was invisible. And as I stood there, staring at that tiny device, I whispered an apology she'd never hear. "I'm sorry, Emily, but I have to know. I didn't sleep that night." I lay in bed with my laptop balanced on my knees, staring at the live feed from the camera. The angle was perfect. I could see her bed, her desk, most of the room, and for the first few hours there was nothing. Just Emily sitting on her bed, scrolling through her phone, her face blank and distant. But then just after midnight everything changed. The door opened. I sat up straight, my pulse spiking, as a man stepped into the frame. He was tall, over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a cold, angular face. His hair was dark, slicked back, and he moved with a kind of confidence that comes from knowing you're in control. Tyler Cross. It had to be. Emily stood stood up immediately, her body language shifting into something submissive, defensive. She wrapped her arms around herself like she was trying to make herself smaller. "You're late," he said, his voice low and sharp. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I got held up. I don't care." He stepped closer, looming over her, and I felt my hands ball into fists. "Do you have it?" She hesitated. "Not all of it." His jaw tightened. "Not all of it? I'm working on it, I swear. I just need more time." He grabbed her arm, not gently, hard enough that she flinched, hard enough that I could see his fingers digging into her skin. "Time," he repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. "You think I have time? You think they have time? Please, Tyler, stop." He released her arm and stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "You're lucky I'm even giving you this chance. Most people in your position don't get second chances." Emily's shoulders shook, and I realized she was crying. "I know," she choked out. "I know. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't pay debts." He turned toward the door, then paused. "You have until tomorrow night. Bring the rest of it, or I'll handle your mother myself." And then he was gone. I sat there, frozen, staring at the screen, my mind reeling. "I'll handle your mother myself." The words echoed in my head, over and over, until they became a roar. He was threatening me, using me as leverage. And Emily, my beautiful, brave, terrified daughter, was caught in the middle. I watched as she collapsed onto her bed, sobbing into her pillow, and every part of me screamed to run to her, to hold her, to tell her I was going to fix this. But I couldn't. Not yet, because I didn't know the full story. I didn't know how deep this went, or how dangerous Tyler Cross really was. So I saved the footage, and I started planning. The next morning, I pretended everything was normal. I made coffee. I toasted bread. I hummed softly as I moved through the kitchen, even though my hands were shaking and my mind was racing. Emily came out of her room looking exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. She poured herself a cup of coffee without looking at me, and I forced myself to speak. "Morning, sweetheart," I said gently. "How do you sleep?" "Fine," she muttered. "You sure? You look tired." She glanced at me, suspicion flickering across her face. "I'm fine, Mom. Just drop it." I nodded and turned back to the stove, biting my tongue. Tomorrow night, Tyler had said. Bring the rest of it. I had less than 24 hours to figure out what it was and how to stop him. That afternoon, I rewatched the footage a dozen times, pausing on every detail, every word, every gesture. I took notes. I screenshotted Tyler's face. I tried to piece together the puzzle. Debts, money, threats. This wasn't just a bad relationship. This was something worse. This was coercion, exploitation, maybe even something criminal. And my daughter was trapped. By evening, I'd made a decision. I couldn't go to the police, not yet. I didn't have enough evidence, and I didn't know if they'd take me seriously. But I couldn't sit back and do nothing. So I did the only thing I could think of. I watched the camera feed again, and I waited. He came back that night. Just after 10, the door to Emily's room opened, and Tyler stepped inside. This time, he wasn't alone. Another man followed, shorter, stockier, with a cruel twist to his mouth. Emily looked terrified. "I brought it," she said quickly, holding out an envelope. "It's all here. I swear." Tyler took the envelope and opened it, counting the bills inside. He nodded slowly, then handed it to the other man. "Good," he said. "You're learning." Emily exhaled, relief flooding her face. But then Tyler stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But there's more work to do. And this time, you don't get to say no." Her face went pale. "What do you mean?" "You'll find out tomorrow." He smiled, a cold, predatory smile that made my blood run cold. "Be ready." And then they left. I sat there, trembling with rage and fear, staring at the screen as Emily broke down completely, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. And I knew, whatever was happening tomorrow, I had to stop it, even if it meant putting myself in danger, even if it meant breaking every rule I'd ever followed as a mother, because if I didn't, I was going to lose her, and I wasn't about to let that happen. I spent the next morning doing something I never thought I'd do, investigating a man I'd only seen through a camera lens. Tyler Cross. The name sat on my tongue like poison. I started with the basics: social media, public records, anything I could find online. There were dozens of Tyler Crosses in the database, but none of them seemed to match the man I'd seen. Too young, too old, wrong location, wrong profession. It was like he didn't exist, or like he didn't want to be found. I tried calling an old friend, someone who'd worked in law enforcement before retiring a few years back. His name was Greg Paulson, and he owed me a favor from when I'd helped his daughter through a rough patch in college. "Claire," he said when he answered, his voice warm and familiar. "It's been a while. What can I do for you?" I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I need help looking into someone. A man named Tyler Cross. I think he's involved in something dangerous." There was a pause on the other end. "Dangerous how?" "I'm not sure yet, but my daughter's tangled up with him, and I need to know who he is." Greg sighed. "All right, send me whatever you've got, full name, description, anything. I'll see what I can dig up." I sent him the screenshot from the camera feed, along with a business card and phone number Emily had written down. And then I waited. By late afternoon, Greg called me back. "Claire," he said, his voice tight with concern, "where did you find this guy?" "Why? What did you find?" "Tyler Cross isn't his real name. It's an alias. His real name is Marcus Hale, and he's got a history. Fraud, coercion, extortion. There's even an unresolved assault case from 3 years ago." My stomach dropped. Assault? Yeah, a young woman claimed he manipulated her into doing illegal work for him, and when she tried to leave, he threatened her. The case was dropped due to lack of evidence, but the pattern fits. I closed my eyes, my heart pounding. What kind of work? Money laundering, mostly. He recruits vulnerable people, usually young women, and uses them as fronts for moving cash. If they refuse or try to get out, he threatens them. Or worse. I felt like I was going to be sick. "Greg, my daughter." "I know," he said gently, "and I'm sorry, but you need to be careful, Claire. This guy is dangerous. If he knows you're onto him, he already threatened me." Silence. "He what?" "I overheard him. He told Emily that if she didn't do what he said, he'd handle me himself." Greg swore under his breath. "You need to go to the police now." "And tell them what?" "That I've been spying on my daughter? That I have no proof except a hidden camera. It's better than nothing." "No," I said firmly. "I need more. I need to know exactly what he's doing to her before I go to the authorities. Otherwise, they'll dismiss me and he'll disappear." Greg was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Be careful, Claire. Men like this don't just walk away." That night, I decided to take a risk. I drove to the address Greg had found, an old apartment complex on the outskirts of town, run down and shadowed by overgrown trees. The streetlights flickered weakly, casting uneven pools of yellow across cracked pavement. I parked a block away and walked the rest of the distance, my heart hammering with every step. I didn't know what I was looking for. Evidence, maybe. Answers. Proof that I wasn't losing my mind. I reached the building and peered through the grimy front window. The lobby was dark, empty, but on the second floor, one window glowed faintly, a single light burning against the night. I stood there for a long time, staring up at that window, imagining Tyler Marcus inside planning his next move. And then I noticed something else. Muddy boot prints leading up the front steps. Fresh. Recent. The same pattern I'd seen in my own hallway. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with fear and fury. He'd been in my house. Not just once. Multiple times. How many nights had he slipped through our door while I slept? How many times had he walked past me, invisible, untouchable? I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my breath. And then I saw them. Muddy boot prints. On my front porch, leading to Emily's window. I got out of the car slowly, my pulse roaring in my ears, and followed the prints around the side of the house. Emily's window was slightly open, just a crack, but enough. Enough for someone to slip inside. I rushed to the front door, my hands shaking as I unlocked it and stepped into the dark hallway. "Emily," called out, my voice breaking. No answer. "Emily." I ran to her room and threw open the door. No lock this time, thank God, and found her sitting on the bed, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. "Mom," she whispered, "you shouldn't be here." "What are you talking about? This is my house." "He's coming," she said, her voice trembling. "Tonight. And if you're here." A floorboard creaked behind me. I turned, and there he was, Tyler Cross, Marcus Hale, whatever his name was, standing in my hallway, in my home, smiling. Time slowed. I stood frozen in the doorway of Emily's room, staring at the man who'd haunted my nightmares for weeks, and every instinct in my body screamed at me to run. But I didn't, because Emily was behind me, and I wasn't leaving her. "Mrs. Thompson," Tyler said smoothly, his voice dripping with false politeness, "I was hoping we'd get a chance to meet." "Get out of my house," I said, my voice low and steady despite the terror clawing at my chest. He tilted his head, amused. "I don't think you understand the situation you're in." "I understand perfectly. You're manipulating my daughter, threatening her, using her for your own sick purposes, and I'm done letting it happen." He laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "Done? You think you have a say in this? I'm her mother, and I'm the one keeping her alive." He stepped closer, and I could smell cologne mixed with something sharper. Sweat, maybe, or adrenaline. "Your daughter owes a lot of money to some very dangerous people. I'm the only thing standing between her and a very bad ending. You're a liar." "Am I?" He glanced past me toward Emily. "Tell her, sweetheart. Tell mommy how you got yourself into this mess." Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "Mom, please, just let him." "No." I turned to face her, my heart breaking at the fear in her eyes. "Emily, whatever he's told you, whatever he's made you believe, it's not true. You don't owe him anything." "She owes them," Tyler corrected, "and if she doesn't pay, they'll come for her. And for you." "Then let them come," I said, turning back to him. "I'm not afraid of you." That was a lie. I was terrified, but I couldn't let him see it. Tyler's expression darkened. "You should be." He reached into his jacket, and for a horrifying moment, I thought thought he was going to pull out a weapon, but instead he pulled out his phone. "One call," he said, holding it up. "That's all it takes. One call and her life is over. And yours too, probably." "Then make the call," I said, my voice shaking now, "because I'm not letting you use my daughter anymore." He stared at me for a long moment, his jaw tight, his eyes cold, and then slowly he smiled. "You've got guts, Mrs. Thompson. I'll give you that." He slipped the phone back into his pocket. "But guts don't pay debts." "How much?" I asked suddenly. He blinked. "What? How much does she owe? Tell me the number and I'll pay it right now, and then you leave forever." Tyler laughed again, louder this time. "You think this is about money? You think you can just write a check and make this go away, isn't it?" "No." He stepped closer, so close I could see the flecks of gray in his dark eyes. "This is about control, about knowing that I can make people do whatever I want, whenever I want. And your daughter," he glanced past me again, "she's very good at doing what I want." Rage surged through me, hot and blinding. "Get out." His smile faded. "Or what? Or I call the police." "And tell them what? That you've been spying on your own daughter? That you invaded her privacy and planted a hidden camera in her room?" He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Who do you think they'll believe, Mrs. Thompson? Me? Or the crazy mother who can't let go?" I felt my hands curl into fists at my sides, and then from behind me I heard Emily's voice. "Mom," she said quietly, "he's right." I turned, my heart sinking. "Honey, no. He's right," she repeated, her voice trembling. "I messed up. I got involved in something I shouldn't have, and now I owe people money I can't pay back. And Tyler, he's the only one who can protect me." "That's not protection," I said desperately. "That's manipulation. Can't you see that?" She looked at me with tears streaming down her face, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. "Defeat. It's too late, Mom," she whispered. "It's already too late." But it wasn't, because at that exact moment I heard the one sound that changed everything. Sirens, distant at first but growing louder. Tyler's head snapped toward the window, his expression shifting from smug confidence to sharp alarm. "What did you do?" he hissed. I smiled. "I called the police an hour ago. Told them I had an intruder in my home." His face twisted with fury. "You stupid." But he didn't finish, because the front door burst open and two uniformed officers stepped inside, their hands on their holsters. "Police." Nobody moved. Tyler froze, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw fear in his eyes. The next few minutes were chaos. One of the officers, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a steady voice, ordered Tyler to put his hands behind his head. He complied slowly, his jaw clenched, his gaze burning with rage as he stared at me. "This isn't over," he muttered. "Yes, it is," I said. The officer cuffed him and read him his rights while the second officer checked the house, making sure there was no one else hiding in the shadows. I stood in the hallway, my whole body trembling, and felt Emily's hand slip into mine. "Mom," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." I pulled her into my arms, holding her as tightly as I could. "It's okay. It's going to be okay." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. At the station, Emily finally told me everything. We sat in a small windowless room with a detective named Sarah Morrison, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a patient demeanor. She handed Emily a cup of water and waited while my daughter gathered the courage to speak. "It started online," Emily said quietly, staring down at her hands. "I met him in a chat room. He seemed nice at first, charming. He said he was a business consultant, that he could help me make money." My heart ached as I listened. "He asked me to help him with some transactions," she continued, "moving money between accounts, picking up packages, that kind of thing. He said it was legal, that I get paid well." "But it wasn't legal," I said softly. She shook her head. "No, it was money laundering. I didn't realize it at first, but by the time I figured it out, I was already too deep. He had photos of me, videos, things he threatened to send to everyone I knew if I didn't keep helping him." I closed my eyes, pain slicing through me. "And then," Emily whispered, her voice breaking, "he said I owed him, that the people he worked for wanted more, and if I didn't deliver, they'd come after me. After you." "Oh, honey," I breathed. "I tried to get out," she sobbed. "I tried so many times, but every time I said no, he'd show up. He threatened me. She trailed off, her shoulders shaking. Detective Morrison leaned forward. "Did he ever hurt you physically?" Emily hesitated, then nodded. "A few times. Not badly. Just enough to scare me." I felt something inside me snap. "I'm going to kill him," I said quietly. "Mrs. Thompson," the detective said gently, "I understand how you feel, but the best thing you can do right now is let us handle this. We have enough to charge him with coercion, extortion, and money laundering. He's not going to hurt your daughter again. You promise?" I asked, my voice raw. She met my eyes. "I promise." We left the station just after midnight, exhausted and emotionally drained. Emily fell asleep in the passenger seat on the drive home, her head leaning against the window, her face still streaked with tears. I drove slowly, carefully, as if the world around us was made of glass. When we got home, I helped her inside and tucked her into bed, something I hadn't done since she was a little girl. "Mom," she murmured as I pulled the blanket up to her chin. "Yeah, honey, thank you for not giving up on me." I kissed her forehead. "I never will." But as I turned to leave, I heard her whisper something that made my blood run cold. "He said this wouldn't be the end. He said he has people." I froze in the doorway. "What do you mean?" "He told me he wasn't alone, that even if he got caught, there were others, and they wouldn't stop." I swallowed hard, fear creeping back into my chest. "We'll deal with it," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Together." But as I closed her door and walked back down the dark hallway, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. The next morning, a letter arrived. It was addressed to Emily in neat, deliberate handwriting. The return address was from the county jail. My hands trembled as I carried it inside and set it on the kitchen counter, staring at it like it was a live grenade. Emily came out of her room a few minutes later, her eyes still red and swollen, and stopped when she saw it. "Is that?" I nodded. She picked it up slowly, her hands shaking, and tore it open. I watched her face as she read, and I saw every emotion pass through her eyes: fear, anger, disgust, exhaustion. And then she handed it to me without a word. The letter was short, simple, and absolutely chilling. "Emily, you think this is over. It's not. You think your mother saved you. She didn't. You think I'm alone. I'm not. See you soon. T." The letter sat on the kitchen counter like a curse. For 3 days, neither of us touched it again, but it was always there, hovering in the corner of my vision, poisoning every moment of peace we tried to reclaim. Emily was a wreck. She barely slept. She jumped at every sound: the creak of the house, the rattle of the mailbox, the distant hum of a car engine. I tried to comfort her, to tell her we were safe now that Tyler Marcus was behind bars and couldn't reach us, but we both knew better. The letter proved it. Detective Morrison called on the 4th day. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, her voice calm but serious, "I need you to bring that letter to the station. We're opening a formal investigation into potential accomplices." I felt a small flicker of hope. "So you believe us?" "I do, and I want to make sure you're both protected. We're also going to assign a patrol car to your street for the next few weeks, just as a precaution." "Thank you," I breathed. But even as I hung up, I couldn't shake the fear gnawing at the edges of my mind. He has people. Therapy became our lifeline. Emily started seeing a counselor specializing in trauma and coercion. I went to a few sessions with her, and it was the first time I truly understood the depth of what she'd been through. "Coercive control is insidious," the therapist explained. "It doesn't always look like violence. Sometimes it's manipulation, isolation, threats, and it's incredibly difficult to escape." I held Emily's hand as she recounted the months of fear, the sleepless nights, the constant pressure to meet Tyler's demands. She cried through most of it, and so did I. But slowly, painfully, we began to heal. The house itself became part of the healing process. One Saturday morning, Emily and I decided to repaint her room. The pastel yellow walls, once cheerful, now felt tainted by everything that had happened within them. "What color do you want?" I asked, standing in the paint aisle of the hardware store, surrounded by swatches and sample cans. She was quiet for a moment, then pointed to a soft, calming blue. "This one," she said. "It feels peaceful." We bought 2 gallons and spent the entire afternoon painting. The smell of fresh paint filled the house, and for the first time in months, I heard Emily really laugh when she accidentally got a streak of blue across her nose. "You look ridiculous," she said, pointing at the matching streak on my forehead. "So do you," I replied, grinning. We stood there, covered in paint, and for a moment it felt like we were going to be okay. But the shadows weren't gone yet. One night, about 2 weeks after Tyler's arrest, Emily woke me with a scream. I bolted out of bed and ran to her room, my heart pounding. She was sitting up, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror. "He was here," she gasped. "I saw him, in the corner, watching me." "Honey, it was just a dream," I said, sitting beside her and pulling her into my arms. "He's not here. He can't get to you." But she shook her head, trembling. "It felt so real, Mom. I could see him. I could hear him." I held her until the shaking stopped, whispering reassurances and stroking her hair the way I used to when she was small. But inside, I felt my own fear rising again. What if he really does have people? The court hearings were brutal. Tyler Marcus sat in the defendant's chair with a smug expression, his eyes occasionally flicking toward Emily with a look that made my skin crawl. The prosecutor laid out the evidence: the coercion, the threats, the money laundering scheme. They played recordings of his voice from the hidden camera footage, and the courtroom fell silent as his cold, threatening words echoed through the space. "You have until tomorrow night. Bring the rest of it, or I'll handle your mother myself." I saw the jury's faces shift, saw the disgust, the anger, and I felt a small, fierce satisfaction. When it was Emily's turn to testify, I sat in the gallery with my hands clenched in my lap, praying she'd find the strength to get through it. said. She did. She stood there, small and scared but unbroken, and told her story. Every detail, every threat, every moment of fear. And when the defense attorney tried to twist her words, tried to suggest she'd been complicit, she looked him dead in the eye and said, "I was afraid for my life, and for my mother's. That's not complicity. That's survival." The courtroom erupted in murmurs, and the judge banged his gavel. But Emily didn't flinch. She was done being a victim. The verdict came a week later. Guilty on all counts. Emily and I sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, holding each other, as the word echoed in our ears. "Guilty. It's over," she whispered. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. It's over. But even as we drove home that day, I couldn't shake the memory of the letter. "See you soon." And I wondered quietly, privately, if it really was over, or if we were just waiting for the next shadow to fall. The weeks after the verdict felt like exhaling after holding your breath for too long. Emily started smiling again. Real smiles, not the forced, fragile ones she'd been wearing for months. She went back to school part-time, started talking about the future, about plans and dreams and possibilities. We had breakfast together every morning. No locked doors, no secrets, just coffee and conversation and the slow, steady rebuilding of trust. One morning, she looked at me across the table and said, "I never thanked you for the camera." I blinked, surprised. "You don't have to thank me for that. I invaded your privacy. I broke your trust. You saved my life," she said simply, "and I'm grateful." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand, tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. "I'd do it again," I said, 1,000 times. We removed the lock from her door. It was a symbolic gesture maybe, but it mattered. Emily unscrewed the deadbolt herself, her hand steady, her expression determined. "I don't need this anymore," she said, holding the lock in her palm. "I'm done hiding." We threw it in the trash together, and that night she left her door open for the first time in months. The house felt different now, lighter, softer. The tension that had clung to every corner like smoke had finally dissipated, replaced by something warmer, something that felt like home again. We opened the windows, let the sunlight spill in, filled the rooms with music and laughter and the smell of fresh-baked cookies. Emily planted flowers in the front garden, bright, colorful blooms that swayed in the breeze and reminded us both that growth was possible, even after devastation. One evening, as I was tidying her room, she'd given me permission, a small but significant gesture. I found a journal tucked beneath her pillow. I hesitated, my hand hovering over it. "Go ahead," Emily said from the doorway, startling me. "You can read it if you want." I looked at her, surprised. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I have nothing to hide anymore." I opened the journal and flipped through the pages. Most of it was filled with her thoughts, her fears, her plans for the future. But one entry, dated just a few days ago, stopped me cold. "I don't know if I'll ever fully recover from what happened, but I know I'm not alone anymore. My mom saved me not just from Tyler but from myself. She reminded me that I'm worth fighting for, and I'll never forget that." I closed the journal and pulled Emily into a hug, both of us crying and laughing at the same time. But life has a way of reminding you that peace is fragile. One morning, as I was cleaning the living room, I found something that made my blood run cold. A small black device, no bigger than a button, hidden behind the frame of a family photo on the mantel. My hand shook as I picked it up, turning it over, recognizing the lens, the shape, the weight. A camera, a hidden camera, one I hadn't installed. I stood there, frozen, staring at the device in my palm, and 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. How long had it been there? Who put it there? What had they seen? And most terrifying of all, were they still watching? I called Detective Morrison immediately. She arrived within the hour, along with a tech specialist who swept the entire house for additional devices. They found 2 more, one in the kitchen, one in the hallway. All of them pointed toward areas where Emily and I spent the most time. "This is professional-grade equipment," the specialist said grimly. "Whoever planted these knew what they were doing." Detective Morrison's face was hard. "We're reopening the investigation. I want surveillance on this house, and I want a full audit of everyone connected to Marcus Hale." She turned to me, her expression softening. "Mrs. Thompson, I know this is terrifying, but we're going to find whoever did this." I nodded, unable to speak, because all I could think about was Tyler's letter. "See you soon." That night, Emily and I sat together in the living room, the windows locked, the curtains drawn, the patrol car parked outside our house. "I thought it was over," she whispered. "It will be," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. She looked at me, her eyes filled with fear and exhaustion. "What if it never is?" I took her hand and held it tight. "Then we keep fighting," I said, "together, no matter what." And as we sat there in the dim light, I made a silent promise to myself, to my daughter, to whoever was watching. They could plant cameras, they could send letters, they could try to break us, but they would never ever succeed, because we were stronger than fear, and we were done being victims. Looking back now, I realized that the day I placed that tiny camera in Emily's room was the day everything changed. Not just for her, for me, because it forced me to confront a truth I've been avoiding for months. Sometimes, protecting the people you love means crossing lines you never imagined you'd cross. I don't regret what I did, not for a second, but I also understand the weight of it, the moral complexity, the violation of privacy, the ache of knowing I couldn't trust my own daughter enough to wait for her to come to me. Parenthood is full of impossible choices, and sometimes the right choice feels wrong in every possible way. But here's what I learned. Trust your instincts, even when they lead you into uncomfortable territory, even when they make you question everything you thought you knew about yourself. Because intuition isn't paranoia. It's your soul telling you to pay attention. And sometimes the smallest act of courage, planting a camera, making a phone call, refusing to look away, can save a life. Emily and I are still healing. We probably will be for a long time. The cameras are gone now, all of them, but the memory lingers. The fear hasn't fully left us, but we're together. And that's what matters. Because in the end, love isn't about perfection. It's not about never making mistakes or always knowing the right thing to do. It's about showing up. It's about fighting. It's about refusing to let the darkness win. And as long as I have breath in my lungs, I'll keep showing up for my daughter, no matter what. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know it was heavy. I know it wasn't easy to hear, but I hope it reminded you of something important. You are stronger than you think, and the people you love are worth fighting for, even when the fight feels impossible. If you've been through something similar, if you're scared, if you're trapped, if you feel like there's no way out, please know this. There is always a way. Reach out. Ask for help. Don't face it alone. And if you're a parent who's worried about your child, trust yourself. Pay attention. Listen to that voice in the back of your mind that says something's wrong, because sometimes that voice is the only thing standing between your child and disaster. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening from? What did this story make you think about? And if you know someone who needs to hear this, please share it with them, because stories like this, stories about survival, resilience, and the fierce power of a mother's love, are meant to be shared. Thank you again for being here. Take care of yourselves, and remember, you are never ever alone.